The president says that he will be releasing his nomination for Supreme Court Justice on July 9th. Whoever replaces Justice Kennedy will have a tremendous amount of power in impacting the nation's key issues. Joining us now from Los Angeles is Loyola Law professor Jessica Levinson. Jessica, CBS News has learned that two leading contenders to fill Justice Kennedy's seat, Brett Kavanaugh, who's a 53-year-old circuit judge in Washington, and also 46-year-old Amy Coney Barrett, who the president recently appointed to the 7th Circuit in Chicago. What do we know about these two?
Well, we know that they're both fully vetted conservative judges, and we know that the Trump administration has been extraordinarily effective in nominating and getting confirmed very conservative judges on the lower court, the Court of Appeals, and now the Supreme Court. And so what the Trump administration has done is essentially outsource the vetting to two conservative organizations called the Federalist Society and the Heritage Organization. So we know that these will be, I think, very dependable conservative jurists. They both clerked on the Supreme Court, one for Justice Kennedy, one for Justice Scalia. They're both now on the federal bench. And I think that the mantra for many Republicans is not Justice Souter, which is a reference to Justice Souter, who was on the Supreme Court, nominated by President Herbert Walker Bush, and moved very far to the left as compared to what Republicans wanted. So I think in this case, we're going to see two very predictable jurists who will be comparatively quite far to the right of Justice Kennedy. You
say definitely far to the right. You know, it was actually Kennedy was nominated under President Ronald Reagan at the time. Do you get a sense, though, I mean, you feel very strongly that this is really going to affect the makeup of the Supreme Court?
I absolutely do. And I think that it's important to remember Justice Kennedy was nobody's liberal jurist. He was a conservative jurist, but he was a moderate conservative. And in the vast majority of cases, he did vote with the conservative wing of the court. But in a few key issues, he didn't. And those are the issues that liberals are worried about. Gay rights. He was the one who authored the opinion that legalized same-sex marriage. In the area of abortion, in the area of affirmative action, in some criminal justice areas. So on the one hand, we can see quite clearly that he was the swing vote in those hot-button issues. Also, I think what's kind of underreported is, I think that behind the scenes, Justice Kennedy had a moderating effect. So there were decisions, and we can look even to the last 2 weeks, that were narrower than what we could have seen with a solidly conservative majority of the court. We can look, for instance, to the Masterpiece Cake Shop case with the Colorado baker who did not want to bake a cake for the gay couple. That was a very narrow decision. If you had a solidly conservative majority of the court, you might have a much broader decision that embraces the idea of religious objectors being able to say to gay couples, I'm not going to make a cake for you. Same with respect to the issue of partisan gerrymandering. In both cases, I think we had no decision, in large part because of Justice Kennedy. What we might see are bigger, bolder, more conservative decisions.
When you sort of look at the framework of the U.S. Supreme Court, what do you say to folks who say, well, it's always kind of tilted a little bit more towards the conservative side?
Well, I would say a couple of things. One, that's not the case. We have to take a broader view, and it's not always tilted towards the conservative side. The other thing I would say is we need to be careful about, and I need to be careful about, the use of the terms conservative versus liberal.
Do you think there's a difference?
Because the current court, we say...
Sorry, Jessica, is there a difference between saying something's conservative as in Republican, or is there a different take on it when you talk about sort of a legal term of conservative?
Well, there is a difference. There should be a difference. But I think that what the American public is seeing now is that it looks like the judges are voting according to who nominated them. If a Republican president nominated them, then they're voting to uphold causes that Republicans care about. If a Democratic president nominated them, then they're doing the opposite. But there absolutely is and should be a difference between conservative legal scholar and conservative politician. But the other thing I want to mention is that the current conservative court is far to the right of past conservative courts. So I believe that this will be the most conservative court we've seen since the early 1930s. So yes, you could have a court that leans conservative, but this court is so much, the center of this court is so much further to the right of anything that anyone in this generation have seen.
So the Supreme Court will now be next in session come October. The president said he wants to seat someone by then. What do you think some of the cases are that they could take up spot that could be impacted by a more conservative court?
Well, I think that, if you look at the areas of voting rights, this is a big area for the court. If you look at issues related to, obviously, gun control is a big issue. If you look at religious rights, if you look at anti-discrimination laws, if you look at environmental controls, criminal justice reforms, all of those things are likely to be decided, if not next term, in the coming terms for the court. They already have granted certification in a number of cases. A lot of those deals will deal with criminal justice. So I think that we could see a very different makeup of the court and very different decisions if we talk next year at this time. And so these are areas that affect most of us are affected by one of these areas, at least on a daily basis.
Yeah, certainly. And many calls also to see more diversity on the bench, both by gender and race as well. Jessica, thank you very much for joining us. Jessica Levinson.
Thank you.